Jerben Jerman. The Waldunga Whadjuk Nyoongar. Kala Mord Kura Nyenich, Ward Pulling, the Double Jurigan, the Wagal Meal, Jennifer Kura, the Yellow Gong, the Yagan, Mord Gala, and Cardinal Wangage. I welcome you to the Whadjuk Dreaming Track, the Double Jurigan, the Swan River. For 60,000 years, the rainbow serpent was part of our culture, religion and spirituality long before colonisation. We knew that as we grew up.
Kura, which in our language means a long, long time ago, there was this little planet that sat out in the universe. And it was freezing cold, the cold time. We call it Nyetting. All our stories begin in the Nyetting, the cold times. And in the Nyetting, there were all these spirits that wandered everywhere. All they knew is they were different shapes. They didn't realise that they would represent birds and plants and animals and trees. They knew they had to go through this process as to which one of them would win the right to care for everything. It reached a point where Nyoongar the kangaroo, Whadjuk the emu and the people were the last three in that race to care for everything, when all of a sudden they heard this voice. "Look at me," it said, and they looked and they saw the great Whadjuk. And the great Whadjuk became real. It had dark scales, and it looked like a serpent or a snake. And with its huge body, it pushed up the sky and disappeared into the darkness. As it was moving across the landscape, its huge body was creating valleys wherever it went, pushing up hills on either side of it as it moved across the land. It'd go under the ground and come up and look around, forming what would become the lakes. And the great Whadjuk came from the east, and as it slithered down the hills, it created the Swan River, the Double Jurigan, right where we are now. So it eventually reached the stage where the last two in the race to care for everything was Whadjuk the emu, and of course the humans. One of the spirits, the spirit woman, wanders away from the great gathering place. And as she moved across the land, she picked up these beautiful little children, and as she admired them, she put them in her hair. And she had this beautiful long flowing hair that we call Jundal, Jumba. Eventually her hair was almost full, and some of them were yelling, "Help!" But there was no one to help them. And the stone she was standing on sprang up like a trampoline and lifted her into the sky. And as she lifted up into the sky, she knew she could never ever walk on the land again. It would be her punishment for collecting the little children. She closed her eyes and she turned into the Milky Way. And they're up there in the night sky, the long streaks of her hair. All the bright stars are the little children. You can still look at the stars and you'll see them twinkling. And the ones still down here on the earth, they would be the ones that would be the carers of everything. The spirit woman herself felt she had done the wrong thing. She bought a gift, the gift of the rainbow. We call it Walgan. And because she couldn't walk on the land, she decided she'd turn into the rainbow serpent. And so she slithered across the land, splashing colour everywhere. and now lives in the land, looking after everything to make sure the colours are there for all to see. And the male lives in the waterways and protects our water. So look closely at the water and you'll see the great Woggal's scales glistening in the water.
This is a Whadjuk. It's the stem of the balga tree. This is where we keep the fire. Long time ago, in the knitting, the moon kept the fire. All the animals wanted the moon's fire to keep warm at night. One day, the swan called out to the moon, "Fire, give us fire." But the moon said no. So the swans flew out to the sun. They got too close and they burnt their beaks. That's why some of the swans in Perth have red beaks. Next, the quarrel bird, a parakeet, stood up and said, "I will fly to the moon and get the fire." He flew up, he took the fire from the moon when the moon wasn't watching. That's why the parakeet has a red patch under his wing. But the moon was angry and he asked the mighty ocean to bring the rain. Quorra was worried that the rain will steal the fire, so he hid it in the stems of the balga tree. That's why we call them the Whadjuk, and we use them to light our fires. Fire is important to our culture and our land. By burning the forest, it makes more room for the plants and trees and creates food for the animals. The little joeys eat the green shoots. The emus eat the fresh quandong fruits. And we dance around the campfire to give thanks. When we dance around the fire, we sometimes ask for the stars to bring us the firstborn. You were one of those stars, Daniel, twinkling in the sky. And it's important I tell you our stories and teach you how to light a fire. We need to pass the flame on to you youngsters to keep the fire alive.
Ever since colonisation, we have suffered injustice in this land of Australia, black people.
My family, my ancestors, they were survivors.
In those days, if you didn't have a white father or a white mother, you were taken away.
Any car that came into the reserve, we all had to run and hide.
We'd have the shout, "Balay, Aliwa, Manat!"
The evil ones are coming and run. They were sent by A.O. Neville, Chief Protector of all Aboriginal people. But we needed protection from them.
They wanted to breed out the blacks.
I was 7 years old when a dark figure came into my room, grabbed me and took me outside and placed me at the back of a truck. My mother woke up screaming in the dark.
And when Mum was 3 months old, she was taken away and put into Moor River Native Settlement.
We lived in degrading, dehumanising conditions, forced to live that way, out of sight, out of mind.
Each night we would all be locked up in dormitories. We were kept there until the next day.
It was a scary place and I just never wanted to be there. Even going back there today gives me the creeps.
We had porridge every morning with worms in it.
We weren't allowed to do anything unless obey the nuns.
We weren't allowed to practice our language and culture and spirituality. They reckoned it was evil.
They had total control over our everyday life.
Nyoongars weren't allowed in town after 6 o'clock. If they were caught, they would be given 3 months jail.
In the movie theatres, there were certain places where Nyoongars could sit, no Aboriginals could sit, and they weren't allowed to leave that section.
In those days, it was a crime to drink a bottle of wine if you're a blackfella. I was jailed growing up for having a bottle of wine in my possession. I paid for it and all. I worked.
I got stopped 10 times in a day to see if I owned my own car.
If you went to the doctors, you had to sit in the surgery and wait till every other non-Aboriginal was seen to before you got your chance to see a doctor.
You could get on the train, nobody sits next to you, and when you go into the shopping centre, the old ladies, you see them grabbing their handbags and everybody's looking at you to see what you're going to steal.
They said you have to have a citizenship before you can join the Navy. I said, I don't need a citizenship. I'm Australian, you need a citizenship.
They didn't want to be helped by an Aboriginal nurse because they didn't want to be contaminated.
In 1967, with that big referendum, we were recognised as human beings. We were classed as fauna and kangaroo.
As Aboriginal people, what we need to remember is we're now recognised as the longest, continuous, unbroken culture of any race of people on earth.
We can move forward. Part of this journey is with everybody, non-Aboriginals as well. This has to be inclusive. It's not us and them. This is about us. We're all here together. Aboriginal people are resilient. It's just already inbuilt. In your DNA, you are a resilient person.
We now have to go forward. Let's do that together.
Don't sit around wishing. Get off your butt and do it yourself.
This is about reconciliation for us.
We all got to work together to make things better.
We need unity. We need education.
For us, yarning and sharing stories and things it's a part of us.